The massive alien vessel hung in the darkness above Earth like a mountain floating in space. It was 3 kilometers long and covered in symbols that no human could read. Inside the ship, 12 species had gathered to deliver a message that they had delivered to countless worlds before. They called themselves the Galactic Council, and they had ruled the stars for 50,000 years. Ambassador Cole stood at the viewing window of the orbital station and watched the alien ship grow closer. She was 52 years old with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of difficult years. Her husband had died during humanity's first contact with aliens, when a misunderstanding led to weapons fire and the loss of 200 lives. Now, she was the one chosen to speak for all of Earth. The council delegation arrived in a shuttle that moved without any visible engines, met them in the station's largest chamber, where chairs had been arranged for beings that did not share human shapes. High Arbiter entered first. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, with a body like an insect wrapped in ceremonial robes. His eyes were compound lenses that reflected its face 1,000 times. "We bring greetings from the Galactic Council," said through a translation device mounted on his chest. "Your species has achieved faster than light travel. This makes you eligible for integration into galactic civilization." Nodded politely. She had prepared for this moment for 3 years. "We are honored by your visit. Humanity looks forward to peaceful relations with all species." Made a gesture that his translator identified as approval. "Then you will accept the standard terms of integration. Your governments will be placed under council oversight. Your military forces will be disbanded. Guidance species will be assigned to manage your development until you reach maturity." The chamber fell silent. His team exchanged glances behind her. She kept her expression calm even as her heart beat faster. "I appreciate the offer," said carefully, "but humanity must respectfully decline. We govern ourselves. We have done so for our entire history and we intend to continue." His compound eyes shifted in what might have been confusion. He turned to his delegation, speaking in clicks and whistles that the translator did not convert. When he faced again, his posture had changed. "Perhaps there is a misunderstanding. Integration is not optional. Every spacefaring species joins the council. This is how order is maintained. This is how peace is preserved." "We understand," replied, "and we value peace deeply, but we cannot surrender our right to govern ourselves. Surely the council can accept an independent ally rather than a subject species." Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried something the translator rendered as patience mixed with warning. "Ambassador Cole, I have performed this duty for 300 of your years. I have integrated 47 species into council protection. Not one has refused. Do you understand why?" Waited. "Because refusal has consequences. The last species to resist integration was corrected. That was 3,000 years ago. Their world is now empty." Felt cold spread through her chest. She thought of her husband, of the daughter they had raised together, of the billions of lives on the planet below. But she also thought of something else. She thought of every time in human history when someone had demanded submission and promised safety in return. "What does corrected mean exactly?" she asked. His translator struggled with the word. It cycled through several options before settling on one. "Unmade. They were unmade." Nodded slowly. "I understand, but my answer remains the same. Humanity will not submit." The delegation returned to their ship that night. Gave Earth 30 standard days to reconsider. He seemed genuinely puzzled rather than angry, like a parent confused by a child's strange behavior. This worried more than threats would have. The United Defense Council met in Geneva the following morning. Leaders from every nation sat around a curved table while Admiral Samuel Drake presented the military assessment. He was 60 years old, a veteran of the corporate wars that had nearly torn Earth apart 2 decades earlier. He had seen death on scales that most people could not imagine, but even he looked troubled. "The Council commands approximately 400,000 warships across known space," Drake said. "These vessels use technology at least 5 centuries ahead of our own. Their shields can stop our missiles. Their weapons can crack continents. Earth currently has 47 combat-capable vessels." The room absorbed this in silence. "Our conclusion," Drake continued, "is that conventional warfare against the Council would result in human extinction within approximately 72 hours of engagement." Defense Secretary Maria Santos leaned forward. She was younger than most at the table, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Admiral, I have a question. Why does the Council want submission? If they can destroy us so easily, why bother with demands? What do they gain from our compliance that simple destruction does not provide?" Drake paused. "This was not a military question. I cannot answer that, Madam Secretary." "Then we need to find someone who can, because I suspect the answer matters more than our ship counts." Over the following days, humanity did something unprecedented. They did not panic. They did not surrender. They did not pretend the threat was not real. Instead, they began to prepare. In public, governments called for calm. Diplomats spoke of ongoing negotiations. Religious leaders prayed for peace. But in secret, something else was happening. Military commanders who had spent their careers preparing to fight each other now shared intelligence openly. Scientists who competed for funding now worked side by side. Old enemies became sudden allies. Admiral Drake called it Protocol Hydra. If you cut off one head, two more would grow. Earth's forces began to scatter across the solar system, hiding in asteroid belts and beneath the ice of frozen moons. They could not defeat the Council fleet, but perhaps they could make victory cost more than the Council was willing to pay. Ambassador Cole watched the preparations from her office in Geneva. On her desk sat a photograph of her husband, smiling in the sunlight of a day that felt like another lifetime. She wondered what he would think of her now, leading humanity toward a war they could not win. But she also remembered what he had told her once, during the dark days after first contact. "Humans are not special because we are strong. We are special because we do not know when to quit." The 30 days counted down, and humanity, for the first time in its fractured history, stood together, not because they believed they could win, but because they had decided that some things mattered more than survival. Cole recorded a message for her daughter that night. She did not send it. Some words needed to wait until they were truly necessary, but she wrote them down so they would be ready. "We did not choose this fight," she wrote, "but we choose how we face it, and we choose to stand." Captain Daniel Perry sat in a dark room beneath the Nevada desert and listened to aliens talk about humanity's destruction. His team had spent 2 weeks breaking the encryption on Council communications. Now, they understood why High Arbiter had seemed so confused by Earth's refusal. The Council had not fought an actual war in over 800 years. Their corrections were not battles. They were executions. The Council would arrive at a world that had not yet developed space travel, demand submission, and then burn the surface from orbit when refused. They had overwhelming power but almost no experience using it against an enemy that could fight back. Perry brought this intelligence to Admiral Drake the same night. Drake read the report twice, his weathered face showing nothing. Then he smiled for the first time since the crisis began. "They are bullies," Drake said quietly. "They have been bullies for so long they have forgotten what it feels like when someone hits back." The preparations intensified. Earth's 47 warships scattered across the solar system like seeds thrown to the wind. They hid in the radiation shadows of Jupiter, beneath the frozen oceans of Europa, inside hollowed asteroids that drifted in the belt between Mars and the gas giants. Each ship carried enough weapons to hurt the Council, but not enough to matter in conventional terms. That was not the point. Commander led the mining operations. Her crews worked around the clock, seeding the approaches to Earth with weapons the Council had never encountered. Nuclear devices wrapped in captured alien technology created fusion reactions that behaved in unpredictable ways. The Council's shields were designed to stop energy beams. They had never faced missiles that exploded with the force of small stars. "They think we are primitives," told her exhausted crews. "Let them think that. Primitives are unpredictable, primitives fight dirty, and primitives have nothing to lose." On the diplomatic front, Ambassador Cole made a decision that many considered dangerous. She began reaching out to the species that had already submitted to the Council. These were the client races, civilizations that had accepted integration generations ago. Most refused any contact, terrified that the Council would discover their communication with the rebel world. But a few responded. There were an aquatic species whose had been integrated 2,000 years earlier. Their representative appeared on a secure channel as a shimmering figure that seemed to be made of flowing water. "We cannot help you openly," they said. "The Council watches everything, but we can tell you what they fear." Cole leaned forward. "What do they fear?" "They fear that you will succeed. Not in defeating them. That is impossible. They fear that you will prove submission is not inevitable. Other species remember freedom, Ambassador. We remember what our ancestors lost. If humanity survives, even briefly, others will ask why they could not do the same. The provided intelligence that changed everything. The Council's unity was fragile. The 12 elder species did not agree on everything. 3 founding races held most of the power, and the others resented their dominance. A successful resistance, even a failed one that cost the Council dearly, could crack the alliance that it held for. Dr. Helen was Earth's leading expert on alien psychology. She had spent her career studying the few alien species humanity had encountered before the Council arrived. Now, she delivered a briefing to the world's leaders that left many of them pale. The Council species share a common evolutionary trait, explained. They all developed as apex predators on stable worlds. They faced challenges, certainly, but nothing like Earth. Our planet tried to kill us constantly. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, plagues. We survived all of it. She paused, looking around the room. This has shaped human psychology in ways the Council does not understand. We developed something they never needed. We call it spite. The willingness to harm ourselves in order to harm our enemies. The willingness to burn everything rather than let someone else take it. The Council species cannot comprehend this. They do not have a word for it. The 30 days passed like water through fingers. Humanity spent every moment preparing for what was coming. Families said goodbyes that they hoped would not be final. Soldiers wrote letters they hoped would never need to be sent. Children asked their parents questions that had no good answers. On the final day, High Arbiter appeared on every screen on Earth. He stood in the bridge of his massive vessel, his compound eyes reflecting stars. Your time has ended, announced. The Council has reviewed your refusal. You will now be given one final opportunity to accept integration. If you refuse again, correction will begin. There will be no further warnings. The world held its breath. In Geneva, Ambassador Cole stood before cameras that would broadcast her response across the galaxy. She looked tired. She had not slept more than 3 hours in any night since the crisis began, but her voice was steady. High Arbiter, I speak for the people of Earth. We have considered your offer carefully. We understand the consequences of our decision. We have seen what your corrections look like. We have studied the dead worlds you have made in the name of order. She paused, and her eyes seemed to find every viewer at once. You should know something about humans, Arbiter. We have made dead worlds too. We made them of ourselves. We bombed our own cities. We poisoned our own lands. We nearly destroyed our own civilization more than once, and we are still here. Cole straightened her shoulders. We are still here because we learned something that your Council never had to learn. Sometimes survival is not enough. Sometimes you have to choose what kind of survival is worth having. She took a slow breath. We choose to remain standing. We choose to face your correction with our eyes open. And if we fall, we will fall as a free people who refuse to kneel. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched in shock. No species had ever responded to the Council this way. No species had ever refused correction with such calm certainty. High Arbiter was silent for a long moment after the human's message ended. Then he turned to his fleet commanders. Begin the correction, he ordered. Make it quick. 400 warships jumped toward Earth, and humanity, scattered across their solar system in hidden positions, prepared to show the galaxy what desperation looked like. Fleet Commander watched the human star grow brighter as his ships approached. He was a reptilian species that had served the Council for 10,000 years. His scales were the deep green of a veteran warrior, from battles fought before most of his crew were born. He expected this operation to last no more than a few hours. All ships report ready, his second officer announced. Correction protocols are loaded. Orbital bombardment will commence upon arrival. Nodded slowly. He had commanded 17 corrections in his long career. None had ever required more than standard procedures. The primitives would hide in their deepest bunkers, and his ships would turn those bunkers into glass. Simple, clean, efficient. The first sign of trouble came near Jupiter. A patrol squadron of 6 ships went silent without warning. Assumed sensor interference from the gas giant's radiation belts. He dispatched a second squadron to investigate. They found debris floating in the darkness, surrounded by the frozen bodies of crew members who had died too quickly to send distress signals. Analysis demanded. Unknown weapon signature, his science officer reported, confusion evident in his voice. Physical projectiles carrying nuclear payloads. They struck at nearly 1/10 light speed. Our shields are calibrated for energy weapons. They were not prepared for kinetic impact. Felt something he had not experienced in centuries: uncertainty. The human attacks began in earnest as the fleet passed the asteroid belt. Missiles emerged from hidden positions, accelerating on chemical rockets before their nuclear payloads detonated against Council shields. Each explosion was relatively small by fleet standards, but there were hundreds of them, then thousands. Admiral Drake coordinated the defense from the UES Defiance, hiding in the rings of Saturn. His bridge crew worked with desperate efficiency, tracking every Council ship, directing every human attack. Fire Group 7 target the carrier on their left flank. Fire Group 12 hit the supply ships in the rear, make them bleed for every kilometer. The tactics were drawn from the darkest pages of human history: ambushes, feints, strategic retreats that drew the enemy into prepared kill zones. Drake had studied every war humanity had ever fought. He knew that superior numbers meant nothing if you could control where and when the fighting happened. The Council ships struggled to adapt. Their commanders had trained for overwhelming force against inferior opponents. They had never faced an enemy that refused to form battle lines, that attacked from all directions, that seemed to value damage inflicted more than survival achieved. The Battle of the Asteroid Belt lasted 3 days. Council ships learned to fear the dark spaces between the rocks, where human fighters waited with weapons armed and crews who knew they would not survive. Lieutenant Vega flew an interceptor barely 20 meters long. Her ship was damaged in the first hour of combat, leaking atmosphere and missing half its weapons. She could have retreated. No one would have blamed her. Instead, she aimed her crippled vessel at a Council carrier that was launching bombers toward Earth. Her final transmission was recorded by both sides. "Tell my mother I love her. See you on the other side." The carrier's engine section exploded as Vega's reactor detonated against its hull. The bomber launch stopped. 300 Council crew members died. One human pilot traded her life for theirs without hesitation. Commander lost 40 ships in those 3 days. He had never experienced losses like this. His subordinates began questioning orders, wondering aloud if the correction was worth the cost. The contingent, forced into service as part of their integration agreement, suffered suspicious equipment failures that kept their ships out of combat. But the Council fleet kept advancing. They had to. Retreat was unthinkable, and despite their losses, they still outnumbered the human forces by 10 to 1. Earth's fleet was reduced to 12 functional vessels. Millions died in orbital strikes on the lunar colonies. Drake watched the casualty reports scroll across his screen and felt something break inside him. These were his people, his responsibility, and he was leading them to slaughter. Then the moment arrived that humanity had been preparing for since the crisis began. Hidden facilities across Earth's surface activated simultaneously. Thousands of missiles rose from launch sites on every continent. They climbed through the atmosphere and oriented themselves toward targets scattered across Council space. Dr. Blake had led the team that created the payload. They called it the scattering. It used captured Council faster-than-light technology in a way the aliens had never imagined. The missiles did not carry warheads designed to explode. They carried devices designed to tear holes in the fabric of space itself. Admiral Drake opened a communication channel to the Council flagship. Commander appeared on his screen, scales dark with exhaustion and stress. "Commander, I have something to show you," Drake said calmly. "We have just launched approximately 8,000 missiles. Each one carries a device that will create an uncontrolled dimensional rupture upon impact. We have targeting data for every Council, every major colony, every significant shipyard in your territory." His eyes narrowed. "You are bluffing. You do not have the technology. We reverse-engineered your FTL drives in 6 months. Your scientists said it would take us centuries. We are faster learners than you expected." Drake paused. 3 of our missiles have been programmed for demonstration. They are targeting uninhabited outposts in your space. Please observe." The outposts vanished 3 minutes later. The dimensional ruptures consumed them completely, leaving nothing but twisted space that would remain dangerous for centuries. Stared at the tactical display showing the devastation. His scales had gone pale. "You would destroy yourselves along with us," he said slowly. "No," Drake replied. We would destroy you. We would die too, certainly, but you would be gone first. Every world you care about, every future you planned, all of it scattered across dimensions that even you cannot reach. This is insane. Drake smiled, and there was no warmth in it. Yes, it is. That is exactly what your council never understood about humanity. We do not fight to win, Commander. We fight to make sure everyone loses. We would rather burn the galaxy than watch our children grow up as slaves. The communication ended. Stood on his bridge, surrounded by officers who looked at him for guidance. For the first time in 800 years, the Council faced an enemy they could not simply overwhelm. And across the solar system, humanity waited to see if spite would be enough. The Galactic Council Chamber had not hosted an emergency session in 400 years. Now the representatives of 12 elder species gathered in a room designed to project power and permanence. The curved walls displayed star maps showing the extent of Council territory. The high ceiling made even the largest delegates feel small. High Arbiter stood at the central podium, his compound eyes scanning faces that showed emotions ranging from fury to fear. The humans have developed weapons capable of striking our core worlds, reported. Their targeting data is accurate. Their technology is functional. 3 of our outposts have already been destroyed. The representative, speaking for Commander's people, rose from his seat. Then we must destroy them immediately. Complete annihilation before they can launch their attack. That option has been considered, replied. It is not viable. The humans have distributed their targeting data to hidden cells across multiple worlds. We have confirmed their presence on at least a dozen planets, including 3 within Council core territory. Even if we destroy Earth entirely, the scattering can still be triggered. Silence fell over the chamber. The Council had never faced this situation. Their entire system of governance was built on the assumption that submission was the only logical choice for lesser species. Elder Counselor of the rose slowly from her seat. She was ancient even by her species' long-lived standards, her silver fur marked with the ceremonial patterns of her office. She had witnessed the last Great War, the conflict that had led to the Council's formation 50,000 years ago. She had hoped never to see another. We must negotiate, said softly. The humans have offered to talk, we should accept. Negotiate with primitives. The representative's voice dripped with contempt. They have been spacefaring for less than a century. They have no right to treat with us as equals. They have weapons aimed at our, replied calmly. Rights are no longer relevant. Only reality matters now. The debate continued for hours, argued for escalation. They demanded blood. Other species wavered, uncertain which path led to survival. But slowly, inevitably, his position gained support. The Council agreed to meet with humanity's representatives. Ambassador Cole arrived at the Council chamber 3 days later. She traveled with a small delegation that included Admiral Drake, still limping from wounds sustained in the battle, and Dr. Helen, who had been studying Council psychology for weeks. Cole looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as she set her notes on the table before her. But her voice was steady when she spoke. We are here to discuss terms, not submission, terms between equals. Leaned forward, his translator buzzing. You are not our equals. You are a primitive species that should never have been capable of threatening Council security. And yet here we are. Cole did not flinch. Your fleet has been reduced by 40 vessels. Your corrections have been delayed for the first time in 8 centuries, and your core worlds are now one signal away from destruction. She paused. If we are not equals, High Arbiter, then we are something worse. We are an enemy you cannot simply crush. The negotiations lasted 6 days. Cole presented humanity's demands clearly. Independence, recognition as a sovereign power, an end to the practice of forced integration, the right to form alliances with any species that chose freedom. The Council rejected every demand initially, but slowly, cracks began to appear in their unity. Doctor had spent the journey analyzing Council behavior. Now she saw her predictions coming true. The founding species, the had dominated the Council for. The other 9 species had submitted to their leadership out of necessity, but submission was not loyalty. On the 4th day, the representative asked to speak privately with Ambassador Cole. They met in a small chamber away from the main negotiations. We cannot support you openly, they said. Not yet, but you should know that 14 species have contacted us in secret. They want to know if humanity's example can be followed. Cole felt hope stir in her chest for the first time in weeks. What do they need? Proof that resistance is possible. Proof that the Council can be challenged without total destruction. If you survive this, Ambassador, others will follow. The final confrontation came on the 6th day. Elder Counselor asked a question that had haunted her since the crisis began. Ambassador Cole, I must understand something. Your species faced certain defeat. Your military assessment confirmed that you could not win against our fleet, yet you chose to fight anyway. More than that, you chose to develop weapons that would destroy everything, including yourselves, rather than submit. Silver eyes studied Cole with ancient patience. Why? Submitted species prosper. They are protected and guided. We offer peace and stability. Why choose devastation? Doctor answered before Cole could speak. Because you do not understand what you are asking for, said softly. You see submission as safety. We see it as death. Not physical death, but something worse. The death of choice. The death of self-determination. She stood and walked to the center of the chamber, looking up at the assembled representatives of galactic power. Human history is filled with empires that demanded submission. They promised safety and order just as you do, and our ancestors fought them. They died in millions to throw off chains that many species here accepted without resistance. Paused. We teach our children about those struggles. Every human child learns the names of people who chose death over slavery. That is who we are. We are not slavers, protested. Integration brings benefits that outweigh any loss of autonomy. To you, perhaps, replied, but you have never been integrated. You have never felt what it means to have your choices made by others, to have your future decided by species who see you as children to be managed. The peoples you have integrated know. They remember. As if on cue, the representative rose from her seat. The formally withdraw from council authority. We stand with Earth. The chamber erupted. 3 other species followed within minutes, their representatives declaring solidarity with humanity. Species that had submitted generations ago now questioned why. If these primitive humans could resist, why had their own ancestors not done the same? High Arbiter attempted to restore order, but his authority was crumbling. The council that had held for 50,000 years was fracturing before his compound eyes. Elder Counselor watched the chaos with an expression that might have been sadness or might have been relief. She had seen this before, long ago, when the old order fell and the council rose from its ashes. Now another old order was falling. History, she realized, was repeating itself, and the humans were its instrument. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Saul. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Galactic Council still existed, but its absolute authority had shattered like glass struck by a stone. Where once 12 species ruled unchallenged, now a fractured assembly debated rather than decreed. Ambassador Cole stood at a window overlooking the ruins of Geneva. The city was being rebuilt slowly, with help from allies that humanity had not known existed a year ago. Engineers worked alongside human construction crews, their aquatic forms housed in specialized suits that let them move on land. Dissidents, followers of Elder Counselor who had broken with their own government, provided technology that would have taken humanity centuries to develop on their own. The cost of victory surrounded her. Memorials rose on every continent. The names of the dead filled databases that would take years to read completely. Every family on Earth had lost someone. The lunar colonies were still being excavated, searching for survivors who were almost certainly gone. But humanity had survived. More than that, humanity had changed the galaxy. The Free Worlds Compact had formed within weeks of the Council's fracture. Earth was its founding member, joined by 17 species that had rejected Council control. Some were former client races who had submitted generations ago and now reclaimed their independence. Others were species from the outer territories who had never accepted integration in the first place. Together, they represented something the Council had not faced in: organized opposition. Admiral Samuel Drake commanded the joint fleet from his new flagship, the UES Phoenix. His bridge crew now included officers from 6 different species. The navigation officer could plot courses through space that humans had never imagined. The defector who served as tactical advisor had more combat experience than any human alive. They worked together not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. Drake visited the memorial on Luna whenever he could. Lieutenant Vega's name was carved into the black stone along with thousands of others. Her sacrifice had become a symbol across the galaxy. The pilot who crashed her dying ship into an enemy carrier rather than retreat. the human who traded her life for victory without hesitation. Other species did not understand. The philosopher had spent weeks interviewing human veterans, trying to comprehend their willingness to die for abstract concepts like freedom and dignity. "You do not fear death," observed during one conversation. Drake shook his head. "We fear death as much as anyone, but we fear some things more: living without purpose, watching our children grow up without choices, knowing that we could have fought but chose not to." He paused, looking at the names on the memorial. "Vega was afraid when she flew into that carrier. I know she was, but she was more afraid of what would happen if she did not." Captain Daniel Perry led humanity's first diplomatic mission to the outer territories. His ship carried a simple message to species that the Council had never fully controlled: "You are not alone. Resistance is possible. Freedom can be won." The response exceeded all expectations. Species that had hidden from Council attention for centuries emerged to join the compact. Others shared intelligence about Council weaknesses, trade routes, military deployments. The galaxy, it turned out, had been waiting for someone to prove that the old order could be challenged. Dr. Helen published her analysis of the conflict in a document that became required reading across known space. She argued that humanity's greatest weapon had not been technology or tactics. It had been psychology. The willingness to embrace destruction rather than submission broke every model the Council had developed over. "They assumed all species were rational in the same way," wrote. "They believed that any intelligent being would choose survival over pride, safety over freedom. Humanity proved them wrong. We are rational, but our rationality includes values they never considered. We would rather die free than live as subjects." This was incomprehensible to them. The Council's remaining loyal species viewed humanity with a mixture of fear and fascination. Some saw them as dangerous monsters who had nearly destroyed galactic civilization over primitive concepts of independence. Others saw something else entirely. They saw a species that had proved the Council's order was maintained not by wisdom or justice, but simply by the absence of challenge. High Arbiter retired from his position 3 months after the crisis ended. His compound eyes had seen too much. The certainty that had guided him for 3 centuries was gone, replaced by questions he could not answer. He spent his remaining years in seclusion, recording memories that he hoped future generations would learn from. Elder Counselor took his place as the voice of moderation within the Reformed Council. She worked with Ambassador Cole to establish new protocols for contact with emerging species. Integration would no longer be mandatory. Submission would no longer be demanded. The galaxy would have to find a new way to maintain order. 1 year after humanity's refusal, Cole addressed the Reformed Council in the same chamber where she had first met High Arbiter. The room looked different now. New species had been added to the assembly. Old powers sat beside former subjects as equals. "We did not seek this conflict," Cole said, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. "We simply refused to surrender what every being deserves: the right to choose their own path, the right to make their own mistakes, the right to stand or fall by their own decisions." She paused, looking around at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. "Humanity offers friendship to every species that respects these principles. We will trade knowledge and technology. We will defend those who cannot defend themselves. We will work toward a galaxy where no species fears correction for the crime of independence." Her voice hardened slightly. "But understand this clearly. We will never kneel. We will never submit our children to the guidance of species who think they know better than we do. We will never surrender the future that our people died to protect." She stepped back from the podium. "Remember what it cost to learn this lesson. Remember the dead on both sides. And remember that humanity did not start this war. We simply refused to lose it." The chamber was silent as she walked away. Behind her, the representatives of 100 species contemplated a galaxy that had been transformed by a single word. No. One small world had said no, and everything had changed. In the years that followed, humanity spread across the stars as partners rather than subjects. They made friends and enemies, discovered wonders, and faced new challenges. They were not perfect. They made mistakes, as they always had. But they made those mistakes freely, and they learned from them on their own terms. The galaxy had been horrified by what followed Earth's refusal: the violence, the destruction, the willingness to burn everything rather than submit. But perhaps that horror had been necessary. Perhaps the old order needed to end, and only fire could clear the way for something new. Humanity stood ready to help build whatever came next, not as rulers, not as subjects, simply as a free people who had proven that the price of freedom, however terrible, was always worth paying.